Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to our 2017 C. May Marston Annual Lecture. As some of you know, this is the year we're celebrating the 125th anniversary of our university. Actually, I'm going to be kind of sad if not all of you know that. But today we have the privilege of remembering someone who was associated with our university nearly from its inception and over almost half of its history. Specifically, we have the opportunity to pause this afternoon and remember Professor C. May Marston, who was known in her own lifetime simply as the legend. She was born in 1877, and she attended high school in Alexander Hall when we were known as the Seattle Seminary. That was the first time we were known as the Seattle Seminary. And then graduated in 1898, a scant 7 years after its founding. She earned her bachelor's degree from our sister school, Greenville College in Illinois, and then her master's degree from the University of Washington. She first joined the faculty at the newly christened Seattle Pacific College in 1902, and here's what she taught: Latin, Greek, English, French, and German, which she taught for 56 years. At the 1952 SPC graduation, she was given an honorary doctorate. Her citation for the degree in part read this way: "We honor you as a teacher, a real teacher who has won your way into the hearts and lives of hundreds of young people. We honor you as a colleague, one who understands, one who is loyal and dependable. We honor you because of your sympathetic understanding and the modest yet effective manner in which you have insisted upon adhering to standards. We honor you for what you have meant to Seattle Pacific College through your multiple gifts. But we honor you most because of your fine Christian spirit, your exemplary life, your devotion to Christian education, and to the cross of Jesus Christ." The endowment to support this lecture was actually given by Dr. Marston's longtime friend and another legend in her own right, Dr. Winifred Wheater. And we are extraordinarily grateful for the contribution of these women to the legacy of SPU, and extraordinarily grateful that we have Owen Ewald continue this for us. Margaret?
Thank you, Provost Van Duzer. I'm Margaret Brown, and I have the honor today of introducing Dr. Owen Ewald. Dr. Ewald is an associate professor of classics here at SPU, and you'll be able to see in just a second why he is our C. May Marston lecturer. Over the past 15 years, he's taught Latin, Greek, ancient literature and translation, art history, and ancient history. He's taught in the University Scholars Program since 2008. How many youth scholars do we have here today? Great, welcome. The languages he can read, and you might want to count along with me, include ancient Greek, Latin, French, German, Italian, Sanskrit, and English. His scholarship includes articles on aesthetics, historiography, and poetics, topography, as well as translations. One of his recent publications is entitled Imperial Roman Cities as Places of Memory in Augustine's Confessions. My personal favorite publication is entitled Latin Diagnoses of New Fungal Species, a Guide for the Perplexed. Who said you can't make Latin fun? In fact, Dr. Ewald's favorite movie with biblical references is The Life of Brian, in part because of the Roman soldier correcting Brian's Latin. So today we have the chance to hear from Dr. Ewald on classics and popular music, and I know that we're in for a treat. Dr. Ewald?
Many thanks to you, Assistant Provost Margaret, to Provost Jeff, Nadine Sakara, to my departmental colleagues, past and present, and all who are here or watching me on YouTube. This topic owes its genesis to a suggestion by Jeff that I talk about music, not just text and images. This topic was further nurtured by teaching with Dr. Doug Thorpe, with whom I've had many great conversations about Bob Dylan, Neil Young, and of course Bruce Springsteen. Dylan will make an appearance early in this talk, and Springsteen will be name-checked towards the end. But I also had to watch myself because of my tendency to gravitate toward more obscure, more hipster music. At some points you may say that the real title should have been Classics and Unpopular Music. But but I will allow myself the freedom to include popular music influenced by undeniably popular music, like the Beatles or Bob Dylan. My choice of subgenres will also lean toward pop, folk, and experimental because these are where the classical influences cluster. You will not hear a complete song, partly because of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act and SBU's own fair use policy. I will restrict myself to short clips of less than a minute to make sure that I'm practicing quotation rather than piracy. If you want to hear the complete song on YouTube, see my paper handout, which I have many copies, for music played and mentioned. Also songs I had to delete in the interest of time, like Led Zeppelin's Last Stand of Achilles, or Iron Maiden's Flight of Icarus. On a less legalistic note, you'll hear adaptations and allusions from a wide variety of ancient literary genres, and a similarly wide variety of subtypes of popular music. You may even hear something familiar from your own misspent youth. You will hear references to epic, philosophy, tragedy, and history, both Greek and Roman. Not coincidentally, those genres are the ones that receive the most play in the classics class that I teach with Doug Thorpe. Also, you will hear a lot about human relationships, a perpetual concern of popular music, and human limitations, a perpetual concern of ancient literary genres. In the Greek epic, the Iliad, the hero Achilles comes to understand that he will die, whether or not he fights in the Trojan War. Oh, wait, not yet. Okay. My slide shows an image of Brad Pitt smoldering his way through the role of Achilles in the 2004 film Troy. In the original epic, Achilles explains, "You see, my mother, silver-footed Thetis, says that two fates carry me towards death's end. If I stay and fight around the city of the Trojans, my homecoming is lost, but my glory will be forever. But if I go home to my ancestral land, my superb glory is lost, and my life will be long, and death's end would not quickly find me." Spoiler alert, Achilles chooses a short life and everlasting glory, which makes him the subject of an epic poem. Bob Dylan, shown here, with a rare smile, voraciously read poetry, as shown in his stage name that alludes to the poet Dylan Thomas. He knew the story of the Iliad when he wrote a song called "Temporary Like Achilles" for his 1966 album Blonde on Blonde. The very title of the song is an allusion to the short, glorious life. And the end of the song mentions Achilles explicitly as a romantic rival of the speaker. This is a version performed by blues singer Deborah Coleman. She's the woman with the guitar to the right of the picture of the young, smiling Dylan. Coleman's version provides a little variety for those who know the Dylan version well. Music, please.
Achilles in your element, don't want me here, he does brag. He's pointing to the sky, and he's hungry like a man in drag. How come you don't get someone like him to be your God? Why are you so hard?
There are a lot of ways to make connections besides the presence of Achilles' name in the title and lyrics. It seems that temporary is one way to do that. Love, like life, is temporary, yet somehow worth it. As Achilles' glory lives on through the poem, the love the speaker feels might pass away, but live on through memory in the song. Another ancient Greek epic, the Odyssey, features the return home of the hero Odysseus after the Trojan War. But it has a lot more female characters than the Iliad. For example, here's Calypso, a goddess who keeps the mortal man Odysseus on her island as her lover. Nevertheless, as shown in the painting at the top center, right here, he looks out at the sea, longing for home, while she remains in her cave. Calypso ultimately lets Odysseus return home to his wife Penelope, and Zeus, the king of the gods, asks her to do so through Hermes, the messenger god. Hermes says, "But since it is not in any way possible for another god to go around nor to disappoint the mind of Aegis-bearing Zeus, let him go if that god stirs him up and orders him onto the restless sea." Calypso replies, "Then I will support him with advice, and I will not sequester him so that very much unhurt he may reach his ancestral land." I'm the first to admit that my translations are somewhat clunky, but their very clunkiness will emphasize the achievements of modern lyricists. For example, Suzanne Vega, an English major at Barnard College, part of Columbia University, read the Odyssey and tons of ancient medieval literature as part of her degree. She's also known as the mother of the MP3 music format, because a clip of her singing was used to calibrate the format's sound quality. Her 1987 song Calypso functions as a reading of the Odyssey from the point of view of the goddess Calypso. Music, please.
My name is Calypso. I have let him go. In the dawn he sails away to be gone forevermore. And the waves will take him in again, but he'll know their ways now. I will stand upon the shore with a clean heart and my song in the wind. The sand may sting my feet and the sky will burn. It's a lonely time ahead. I do not ask him to return. I let him go. I let him go.
A couple things to know. A lot of Vega's songs begin, "My name is," or "I am," just to cue the listener to make an imaginative leap. The song might sound like the result of a writing prompt, to write in the voice of a mythological character, but the result's largely successful in putting modern flesh on the ancient bones. Rather than emphasize Calypso's obedience to higher-ranking gods, this song emphasizes that Calypso herself let Odysseus go deliberately, even though she could not bring herself to name him. In a concert version I heard, yes, I was a fanboy, Vega repeated, "I let him go," several times. Much more than twice is the last line of the song. Calypso portrays her action as ethical, letting him go, quote, "with a clean heart," unquote, since Odysseus longs to return to his mortal wife Penelope. Calypso also emphasizes that her action has a personal cost, it's a lonely time ahead, and that her existence continues forever past Odysseus' departure. Vega does not make an explicit personal connection outside the song, but the song could also apply to relationships that we let go, especially youthful romantic attachments that were wonderful but had no future. But I should not neglect Roman epics. Virgil, Aeneid 2, is famous for the description of the burning of Troy at the end of the Trojan War, as shown in the top center in a history painting by the French artist Poussin. Virgil writes, "But then all Troy seemed to me to sink into fires, and Neptunian Troy to be overturned from its foundations." Next, Virgil zooms in for a close-up to appeal to other senses, and already the fire is heard more clearly throughout the walls, and the flames of heat surge nearer. Virgil places the blame for the Trojan War on a woman, Helen, whose adultery started the war in the first place, and puts less emphasis on the machinations of the gods. The destruction of the ancient city of Troy at the end of the Trojan War was compared to a doomed romantic relationship by no fewer than two Irish poets, William Butler Yeats in the early 20th century and Sinead O'Connor in the late 20th century. Their pictures appear in the upper right of the slide. Both use the idea of an other or another Troy that on the literal level cannot be burned because the first Troy has already been burned by Virgil. In his 1916 poem, No Second Troy, William Butler Yeats talks about his love for the revolutionary Maud Gonne, and the poem concludes, "Why? What could she have done being what she is? Was there another Troy for her to burn?" The implication seems to be that Maud is like Helen and will cause destruction as part of her very nature. Sinead O'Connor, in the upper right, is now a grandmother, but in the 1980s, she burst on the pop music scene as a powerful vocalist from Ireland with a shaved head and a sense of history. Her 1987 song, Troy, riffs off the Yeats poem. Her beloved is not revolutionary, but irresponsible and unfaithful. Here, a man is the destructive one and the woman the destroyed. Music, please.
What you are, there's no other Troy for you to burn.
Glad I got to play that for you, since not only because I cannot hit that note, but also so you could hear the little growl at the end. Again, that's something that has to be heard rather than described. It's both an allusion to Yeats, being what you are recalls being what she is, and an allusion to the destruction of Troy, as described in the Aeneid. There are some uses of tragedy with a small t in many types of popular music, such as Wayne Cochran's 1962 song, Last Kiss, about the death of his girlfriend in a car accident and his hope to see her in heaven. But other uses refer to specific works of classical Greek tragedy, an ancient type of drama with very specific traits. These traits include an alternation between chorus and characters, unavoidable suffering, and the unities of time, place, and action. Not all these traits are good for a 3-minute-long, radio-friendly song. More obscure singer-songwriters with more creative control see the riches to be mine in classical Greek tragedy. For example, Euripides' tragedy Hippolytus was first performed around 428 BC. It provides inspiration to American artist Julia Holter's 2013 album Tragedy. And I need to thank SBU alumnus Sam Philby, who first told me about Julia Holter. Julia Holter returns for inspiration to Greek poetry of various types, such as Anne Carson's translation of the Greek poet Sappho. The most unusual cut on the tragedy album is Goddess Eyes. It has Laurie Anderson-style synthesizers that you're going to hear, but it's also true to the dynamics of the play, where vision is a huge theme. Other characters are involved with looking. Aphrodite, goddess of love, sees Hippolytus as an enemy for refusing to marry and plots his death. Also, Phaedra, Hippolytus' stepmother, falls in love with him at first sight, kind of the Potiphar's wife motif. But in the song, the goddess eyes belong to Artemis, goddess of hunting, whom Hippolytus worships above all other gods. In this scene from Euripides, Artemis laments watching Hippolytus die. I'll read that to you. Artemis the goddess is in these precincts. O wretch, to you she is the dearest of gods. Lady, do you see me, the miserable one? How I am? I see, but it is not right to shed tears from my eyes. You do not have your hunter, nor your attendant. No, indeed, but you die dear to me. Nor a guard of your horsekeeping, or of your statues. No, treacherous Aphrodite planned it like this. Holter more or less translates the parts spoken by Artemis with some rearrangement and leaves out the Hippolytus parts in her song, which has only about 6 lines of lyrics. Music, please.
Exotic goddess trapped in them, and he found no one to get in your life. You are dear to me, dear to me.
This may not seem like a very big portion of the play, but it's of particular interest as one of the few times when the Greek gods seem to show regard and affection towards mortals. Perhaps such affection appeals to modern songwriters, who would then have the option to write in the voice of an ancient goddess or to take on her larger-than-life perspective. There's a sequel to the song Goddess Eyes 2 on the album Ecstasis, and the video for the song shows Julia Holter looking at and handling small figurines that represent full-size humans, the limited human world seen from a divine perspective. Another tragedy by Euripides, Orestes, originally performed 408 BC, is one of the darkest and snarkiest Greek tragedies ever. Even ancient commentators could not help remarking that almost all the characters were morally bad. On stage, the main characters generate at least 4 different schemes that involve kidnapping or murder. For example, while the main characters attempt to murder Helen, queen of Sparta and cause of the Trojan War, the chorus sings despairing but gorgeous songs like these. Revenge came to Helen through justice of the gods, for she filled all Greece with tears because of the destructive shepherd Paris, who brought Greece to Troy. Professor Sarah Duger, whose likeness appears on the poster, and in the upper right, a certain resemblance to Carrie Fisher, I'll admit. She's now teaching at Portland State University. Her academic resume includes not only a doctorate in classics and scholarly articles, but also rock albums and advocacy work with early adolescent girls in music. Duger created a series of songs based on choral odes from Orestes, including the one shown here. It's a rare example of a creative translation becoming a pop song directly. Musically, her songs are very much in the vein of the indie rock band Slater-Kinney, especially their mid-2000s albums. In fact, Duger has played in the band Cadalica with Corin Tucker of Slater-Kinney. Music, please. As we saw above, Euripides ends on a different note, with blaming the long-dead Paris, Helen's lover. And again, double curses on him. Dugard picks that up. But Dugard adds a small coda at the end to critique, perhaps through emphasis, the snarky woman blaming that permeates Euripides' ode. Also, the song reminds listeners that Helen is about to be murdered, which is especially important for versions not accompanied by stage action. Spoiler alert, she is rescued by the gods in one of the few bright moments of the play. Also, you can probably hear that Dugard's translation has a lot more energy than mine. If you're going to set the lyrics to ride girl music, the relative clauses need to be pruned, the key phrases need to recur to fill out the musical phrasing. My final example of tragedy is Oedipus at Colonus, a play by Sophocles originally performed in 405 BC after the playwright's death. It was performed in Athens as they were about to lose the Peloponnesian War against Sparta, and it features Oedipus, who was infamous for unknowingly killing his father and marrying his mother. But in this play, Oedipus becomes purified of his crimes at Athens and later becomes a local god in the neighborhood of Colonus. In this section, the chorus leader welcomes Oedipus as a refugee. Guest, you have come to the mightiest pens of the earth, this land with beautiful horses, bright Colonus, where the high-pitched nightingale, a very frequent visitor carrying wine-faced ivy, warbles beneath the green woods, and you have come to the god's shrine, leafy and loaded with berries, sunless and windless, away from all winter storms. In 1983, lyricist Lee Brewer and Broadway composer Bob Telson reworked this ancient tragedy into a musical with an all-African-American cast, and many of the singers came from Pentecostal Christian traditions, even if the authors and their lyrics do not. Despite the title, the musical is not strictly gospel, as perhaps Dr. Newby would define it, but an oddly untheological blend of R&B, gospel, and Broadway show tunes. The little picture shows a 2015 production at the Ebony Rep Theater in Los Angeles with William Allen Young and Roger Robinson as the chorus leader and Oedipus, respectively, to help you visualize what's going on in this version. Brewer and Telson's version of this choral ode is lovely. It does a great job with nature imagery, but again, it's not true gospel music because it praises a place rather than God. Music, please.
Fair colonies, land of running horses, where leaves and berries strong, and wild dog ivy climbs the bough. The sweet sojourning nightingale murmurs all night long.
Note here how the adjectives are toned down, the sentence structure is simplified, yet most of the nouns that characterize the spot of Colonus are still there in one form or another. Also, while much of the music for Greek tragedy was lost, I could imagine that the original music by Sophocles for Oedipus at Colonus was equally high-pitched or sweet. And here I'll turn from tragedy to philosophy. Philosophy and pop music might seem to be polar opposites, especially since Plato attacks Homer and the popular music of ancient Greece in Book 3 of his treatise, The Republic. It is ironic then that Plato's Republic, which features attacks on popular music, is connected to at least one modern pop song. I was tempted to connect Elliott Smith's Rose Parade with the opening of The Republic, but I decided that was a bit too much of a stretch. This other example will be on much more solid ground. In Book 7 of The Republic, Plato has Socrates describe education through philosophy as coming out of a cave into blinding light. Then consider, I said, their deliverance and healing from their chains and unawareness, when they are released and suddenly forced to rise up and to turn around their necks and to step forward and look up at the light. They hurt at doing all these things and are unable, because of the glares, to look at those things whose shadows they used to see formerly. This experience is perhaps based on Odysseus in the Odyssey, who lands on his home island of Ithaca near the Cave of Nymphs, and at first fails to recognize his home after 20 years away. And there are two entrances to the cave, the North Passage for mortals, but the South Passage is too sacred. No mortals at all enter by that way, but it is the path of the gods. And although sleeping on his native land, shining Odysseus woke up, but he did not recognize it, since he went away a long time ago. I mention the cave not only because of Plato, but also because of the ancient idea that a cave is where the gods and mortals interact, or where truth and illusion meet. Odysseus' failure to recognize his homeland is not simply a matter of changing landmarks, of trees that were cut down, or of houses that collapsed in an earthquake, but a matter of his own internal changes and perhaps of growth and wisdom. It is also significant that he wakes up, another metaphor for intellectual realization or growth. Mumford & Sons, British folkies, have a song from their 2009 album Sigh No More called The Cave. This song has the advantage of alluding to both Plato's cave and the cave of nymphs in the Odyssey. Coming out of the cave means seeing the world as it really is, even if you do not recognize it. Music, please. Wait, try the next one. There we go.
So come out of your cave, walking on your hands, and see the world hanging upside down. You can understand dependence when you know their maker's land. So make your sirens call and sing all you want. I will not hear what you have to say.
Much commentary on the song connects the cave to Plato, partly because Plato's cave is a bit more famous, but I argue for the joint influence of the Odyssey. In the part I just played, there's an allusion to the Odyssey, to a scene where Odysseus sails past the sirens, who sing flattering songs to lure sailors to their doom on the rocks, like the German Lorelei. Odysseus orders his crew to tie him to the mast and to stuff their ears with wool so that they would not be tempted to sail nearer, while Odysseus could still hear the song about his own glorious deeds. In the Mumford & Sons song, the reference to the siren's call brings up the theme of shedding falsehood, whether it's visual or musical, in order to embrace truth. I do not want to neglect Roman philosophy, so here I turn to Cicero. Cicero's enjoying a bit of a renaissance right now. Professor Danielle Allen of Harvard, shown here in front of her bookcases, has described in recent pieces in the Washington Post what Cicero still has to teach us. The risks of holding power are the subject of Cicero's work, The Tusculan Disputations. In a philosophical anecdote, Damocles is the parasite or official moocher of the tyrant Dionysius II of Syracuse around 360 BC. If the term official moocher seems a bit harsh, note that some American presidential administrations have had similar figures, such as President Harding's card-playing buddies. Official moochers were often short-lived in ancient Sicily since their tyrant patrons had short lifespans. Dionysius asks his official moocher Damocles whether he wants a taste of what it is like to live the blessed life, like a tyrant. When Damocles says yes, Cicero describes what happens next. Dionysius ordered a shining sword to be tied with a horsehair rope so that it hung over the neck of that blessed man. So Damocles kept seeing neither those handsome servants nor the silver full of skill, nor was he stretching out his hand toward the meal. Already the very wreaths he wore were slipping off. Finally, he begged the tyrant to be allowed to go away, since he no longer wanted to be blessed. Hence, anything risky is called the sword of Damocles, and great power comes with great risk, as emphasized in the middle image. The sword over the chair. In the movie musical, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, there's an allusion to the sword of Damocles in the very title of one of the songs, called, oddly enough, Sword of Damocles. Again, this is more of an illusion than anything else, but Richard O'Brien, who wrote the song, knew the story, if not the exact words of Cicero. In the context of the musical, Rocky, the newly created Frankenstein's monster of the film, sees its existence as just as risky as being a moocher or tyrant in classical Sicily. Rocky is shown in the rightmost image. He sings, music please.
The sword of Damocles is hanging over my head, and I've got the feeling someone's gonna be cutting the thread. Woe is me, my life is a misery. Oh, can't you see that I'm the son of a pretty big downer?
Sure. I'm at the start of a pretty big downer. Might be the 1970s way to say, I no longer want to be blessed. Also, we've got that clever rhyme of head and thread, which shows that O'Brien has some familiarity with the Ciceronian original. This might seem to be on the very fringes of pop music, but the Rocky Horror Picture Show seems to be rediscovered by every generation of college students. So I thought I'd further enrich that experience by unpacking its philosophical ancestry. The sword of Damocles occupies a zone between philosophy and history in its use of an historical example to make a philosophical point. But I want to discuss a few more historical examples in a less philosophical mode. Greek history is not very frequent in pop music, and one of the best examples I found is something that's quite obscure. Athenaeus' literary work, Scholars at Dinner, from about 200 AD, describes the Sybarites, who lived in the arch of the boot of southern Italy. He writes, and the Sybarites had gone to such an extent of luxury that they even trained their horses to dance to flute music at their feasts. Then, as Aristotle relates in the Constitution of the Sybarites, since the Crotonians knew this when they began to fight the Sybarites, they produced the dancing song for their horses. You see, their flute players were present in military dress. As soon as the horses heard the flute players, they not only danced away, but while carrying their riders, they also deserted to the Crotonians. Note that dancing horses are not impossible, as shown in the left image. Athenaeus also mentions that the Cardians in Asia Minor had suffered a similar fate, marking this event as more folklore or legend than history. The pop music reference is a 1985 hit from Liverpool's own Echo and the Bunnymen. Bring on the dancing horses. The band has claimed the song is a reference to a Russian saying describing imminent disaster. But the Russian saying is based on the legendary anecdotes above. The song has a lot of weird, cryptic lyrics that may refer to the speaker's idea that whatever he does about love will end up in disaster or heartbreak. Ian McCulloch, shown in the center image with the puffy hair, sings, music please. I made sure to include this song not only because of my own misspent youth, but also because when I first met Dr. Rice of the philosophy department, she was playing this song on her radio. One other connection is that the song was recorded specifically for the 1985 John Hughes film Pretty in Pink, starring Molly Ringwald, who was in pretty much every movie in the 1980s. See the movie still of the red-haired actress in the upper right corner, giving someone the side eye. Right here. Okay. The movie itself is pretty formulaic and concerns a high school girl loved by both a nerd and a jock. Yet the soundtrack was quite good. Not only featured Echo and the Bunnymen, but Suzanne Vega, whom I mentioned earlier. Much more than Greek history, Roman history, especially the history of the Roman Empire, influences pop music. By some reckonings, the Roman Empire begins with the military defeat of the Egyptian pharaoh Cleopatra, one of the most famous figures in ancient history, shown here on the face of a coin, center top. As the last of the Ptolemies who succeeded Alexander the Great, she committed suicide after she lost the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, shortly after the suicide of her lover, Marcus Antonius, the father of two of her children. The person who defeated her was Octavian, later Augustus, the first Roman emperor. He humbly named the month of August after himself. The Cleopatra Ode of the Roman poet Horace, commissioned by Augustus, describes her suicide by poisonous snake to avoid being humiliated in Octavian's victory procession. She dared to see with a calm face her palace lying in ruins and to handle harsh snakes so that she might drink dark poison with her body. More fierce than her premeditated death, obviously spurning her swift Liburnian ships, as she prevented herself, not a lowly woman, from being led in a proud triumph. In the 2015 song Cleopatra by the Lumineers, the speaker recalls Cleopatra, but with empathy, as if following a script written by others. Music, please.
I've read this script and the costume fits, so I play my part. I was Cleopatra, I was taller than the rafters, but that's all in the past, love gone with the wind. And now a nurse in white shoes leads me back to my guest room. It's a bed and a bathroom, and a place for the end. I won't be late for this, late for that, late for the love of my life. And when I die alone, I'll be on time.
The word script might also be a reference to Elizabeth Taylor, who appears in the 1963 movie blockbuster Cleopatra, the most expensive movie made up to that time. Taylor, shown in the center image with headdress, was a figure of fascinating glamour for many moderns, as Cleopatra was for the ancients, partly because their personal lives were so much larger than life. But in the Lumineers song, the speaker has lost the plot of life by missing, quote, the love of my life, unquote, and she drove a cab to keep body and soul together. Note the figure wearing a polyester seatbelt at the upper right, a still from the video for this song. And the speaker will die alone in a nursing home rather than by heroic suicide, as Cleopatra did. Here's an example of the literary technique called in Latin oppositio and imitando. By invoking the glamour of Cleopatra and Elizabeth Taylor, the speaker calls attention to the unglamorous loneliness of their life, and again, to human limitations and to the fleeting nature of romance. Here I turn to the Greek writer Cassius Dio's description of the eruption of Vesuvius from the perspective of 140 years after the event. And the sky began to echo, and after this, an unusual thud was heard, as if even the mountains were falling down, and first very large stones shot up so as to reach these peaks. Then a huge fire and limitless smoke spewed out, so they darkened all the air. And all of a sudden was hidden, as if it had gone into eclipse. And in addition, the eruptions kept destroying 2 entire cities, Herculaneum and Pompeii, whose people were in the theater. Cassius Dio does not describe particular people or individuals, but takes a bird's eye view, or a God's eye view. Modern songwriters can still use this perspective, but they need to add parts that are up close and personal so that their listeners can connect with the song. The band Bastille have a fairly popular song called Pompeii from the 2011 album Bad Blood. And I need to thank my colleague, Dr. Michel Beauclair, for making me aware of this tuneful and literate band with a French name. Who sing, music please.
We were caught up and lost in all of our vices. In your poses, the dust settled around us, and the walls kept tumbling down in the city that we love. Great clouds roll over the hills, bringing darkness from above.
All right. Note the movement between the speaker and the addressee and the forces of nature, clouds of volcanic dust and an earthquake, both of which happened during Vesuvius' eruption. Moreover, there's an idea from the Victorian period that the eruption was a punishment for Roman vices. At the upper right, see the bearded Victorian gentleman, Sir Edward Bulwer-Lytton. In his novel The Last Days at Pompeii, the Christian character Olympus cries, "God is forth on the wings of the elements. The new Gomorrah," namely Pompeii, "is doomed. Fly, ere the fires consume thee." And yes, the punctuation is original. And even if the members of Bastille never read this novel, the connection between the vices of the new Gomorrah and natural disaster seems typical of the way humans think about causality. Moreover, the mention of your pose may refer to the fact that many Pompeians were trapped by the ashfall and frozen into a particular pose. If you look at the center image, they were excavated by archaeologists over a millennium and a half later and captured in plaster. They poured the plaster into the hollow, left after all the organic matter trapped within the ash had decayed. The sack of Rome in 410 AD left a huge cultural footprint. St. Jerome, in the center image, known for his translation of the Bible into Latin, wrote a short poem about the sack of Rome, partly because his friend, the nun Marcella, had died in it. Who can set forth the carnage of that night? What tears are equal to its agony? Of ancient date, the sovereign city falls, and the lifeless in its streets and houses lie, unnumbered bodies of its citizens. In many a ghastly shape does death appear. Jerome focuses on mass casualties and sufferings in his poem, even while the surrounding letter describes in particular the death of his friend Marcella. A band called the Airborne Toxic Event picks up this disaster in a song called Fall of Rome from a couple years ago. The name of the band is not a reference to the dust clouds from Vesuvius, but to Don DeLillo's 1985 novel White Noise, shown at the upper right with the event on the cover. But the Vesuvius' eruption is combined with the fall of Rome in the song, so for the Airborne Toxic Event, the disaster of a doomed city, Rome or Pompeii, is applied to a doomed romantic relationship. The stanza begins with a long view of the disaster within history, then zooms closer into a personal relationship. The vocal style of the lead singer, as you'll hear, owes a lot to Bruce Springsteen. Music, please.
Whatever happened to the fall of Rome? Those people all turned to ashes and stone. It's a trick of the mind. You think it won't end. It's a contest with time. time always wins. I saw a picture of you the other day in your wedding dress, and I wondered why I walked away like I had with the rest.
Note the connections. Vesuvius' eruption and the sack of Rome are connected to the inevitable end of any human enterprise. Time always wins. And from there the song moves to the picture in your wedding dress, as the speaker's former girlfriend, one of many, has married someone else. This may seem a bit over the top, but this is part of how pop music works. Acknowledge your pain to help your audience cope with their pain. An even larger pattern is that popular music sings about love, especially unsuccessful love. And if a songwriter can make a song more dramatic, with an allusion to ancient literature or history, why not do so? In some, 4 ancient genres, epic, tragedy, philosophy, and history, seem to have the most influence on English language popular music. Some influences are only traces or indirect, while others are full-blown literary translations. One of the most frequent connections is between romantic love, which popular music describes, and human limitations, which ancient literature describes. Such connections make music more layered and complex, and understanding such connections makes our experience of music all the richer. Thank you. I've got time for questions? Yes, Peter.
Thanks for your lecture, Owen. I enjoyed it a lot. So I have a question about what do you think these illusions do for like the teenage kid who just likes Mumford and Sons and thinks the song has a cool beat? I mean, how do you think these illusions work for them? Because I feel like the academics, we get our jollies from this. So how does like the general listener respond?
Let's see. I want to say it goes both ways. Perhaps if they've heard of Plato's Cave, they might it might activate something, or I've even heard of it activating a desire to learn about Plato's Cave. Okay, or let's say perhaps say Coldplay, because their treatment of the French Revolution, I think, has inspired more than one person at least to look up and find out, what liberty leading the people was all about. So I want to say there's a dialectic there, not only activating prior knowledge, even if it's small, but exciting a desire for further knowledge. Doug.
And I will testify to that, since first hearing Dylan's lines in Desolation Row about Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot fighting in Captain's Towers, I had no idea who Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot were, but I got really interested in finding out. And my question is, and as somebody who loves pop music, as you know, hearing these SMIPs, and you and I have just been with these students through the Iliad and through some of the great works, I must admit that they feel slight in comparison to Homer and Sophocles. Do you want to make a case for some of these that there really is, that they take the illusion and do something the way Yeats, for example, creates a great work of art through the illusion?
Or that they have to function, they also have to function as a song, or, right. Yeah, that it's, or I'd say that it's another tool in their toolbox, for shaping the song as they like. Yeah, that's also why I wanted to give you ones like Vega and Duggar, where it's more like you port an entire situation, or for Duggar, you track the Greek fairly closely.
Yeah, are any of these songs, do you think, that do kind of stand up? I mean, that really use the illusion in a way where there's some real depth and complexity?
Yes, and I think some of the other ones I eliminated because the illusion did not work very well. Not to slag Iron Maiden too much, but their Flight of Icarus, doesn't seem to, doesn't seem to recognize that Icarus goes down in flames. It's an encouragement to fly near the sun. Right.
They flunked.
Right. Yeah. And they actually rejected as their guitar player a guy named Ian Morris, who's now a classical archaeologist at Stanford. So he sent his audition tape, Iron Maiden sent it back, no thanks. But I think he could have set them straight.
possible that Iron Maiden is rewriting the story? I mean, could they be playing with the illusion and then changing it into something else?
Possibly. It's just that it just seems like the important part of the myth is the ending, which they sort of deny. I don't know. I suppose there is some kind of game with it, or also the cover of that single shows Eddie, their skull-headed mascot. Basically, he's flown up on bat wings and set Icarus on fire. So perhaps there is some kind of game, but it's just, I don't know, I'd say it seems to sort of miss the point in a couple different ways. Yeah. Again, not to slag it as a song, but as a treatment of myth. Yeah, it left me unsatisfied. So. Yes.
Owen, what did you think about Dylan winning the Nobel Prize? Did you think that was, I guess, to get back to Doug's point about, because there are people who derided that as he's a lightweight, and yeah, so what do you think about that?
Oh, I think Dylan's great. I think he totally deserved that. I also note that it was a prize for his lyrics rather than for his performances. Okay, that's partly why I had Deborah Coleman, perform there. So, yeah, but no, I thought that was very much deserved, and that he takes the not only elements from the old Weird America or the Great American Songbook and repurposes them in new ways. Or if you can write a new murder ballad, I mean, you've really gone up to a high literary level. Marissa.
Do you notice any trends of gender in terms of like who is using these illusions in pop culture, or like if it's pretty balanced between men and women adapting these, or like certain genders are adapting them? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that there were more male examples, but I think that the let's say that the examples from women, I'd say, did more with it, or were deeper, made more use of different points of the story. And certainly, let's see, if you know any other ones, more recent ones, let me know. Let me know. Again, I've had to make a selection here, so if there are some other more complex ones, by all means, I'd love to treat them like in a book chapter or something. Yeah. Carrie.
The Mumford & Sons song on Cave, it reminded me of G.K. Chesterton's narrative about St. Francis, that he came out of a cave upside down, walking on his hands, and saw everything differently. Do you think that also could be an illusion that they're making?
Definitely. And I'd say probably it would be left to one of your colleagues in theology, to do something about popular music and the Bible, because that would include several different examples, several different genres there. Yeah.
What do you think when Mumford & Sons are writing this and adapting it? I'm just wondering, might they have in mind multiple illusions, not just necessarily the classical ones?
Sure. Absolutely. You never, let's see, a lot of times poetry tries to say two different things at the same time. So to allude to two different texts at the same time would be a great way to proceed, a great thing to activate. Please.
Oh, and I think you mentioned at the beginning of your talk that most of the examples that you found were from folk and alternative rock. Is that what you said?
Yeah, or I'd say, in some cases, pop music that makes it onto the radio, but not a huge number. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, is that because that's what you tend to focus on, and so you're familiar with that music, or is that because that genre tends to be more, make more allusions to those classical texts?
Definitely the second one. Yeah, certainly there are genres. I think, for instance, rap music, where the Bible is definitely much, much more important.
There were no country songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, or I'd say there it's more sort of British history, if you like. Yeah. Hannah.
Well, I noticed that the genres that you said you were pulling primarily from were epic, tragedy, philosophy, and history, and you didn't mention lyric, and I was curious what you thought about that. Is there less of a connection to ancient lyric poetry? Because I would have thought that would be maybe more next to that.
Sure, they'd be about the same length, about the same scope. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I didn't find too many examples from the pop genre. I guess if I think there are a couple Julia Holter examples. Okay, but again, like there didn't seem to be a clump of them. But I'll keep looking. All right. Okay. Well, thank you for your questions. Now, let's adjourn to have some treats. Thank you.